8.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws. Please take notice that decisions of the Metro Community Relations Commission may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of certiorari. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the Commission. Any person or other entry considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. Thank you all for coming on this extremely hot day in July. We have, in addition to our new commissioner last month, Jermaine Cole, if you have not met Jermaine Cole. We have 3 new commissioners. Commissioner Carmen Reese Foster, she's over there. Commissioner Claudia Weber, there. And Commissioner Sarah Martin, right here. I'd like to ask each of you to introduce yourselves to us and to get rolling.
Okay, I'll start first. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Carmen Reese Foster. I've been a Nashville resident for about 16 years now. I'm an assistant professor of social work in the MSW program director at Belmont University. I'm also the executive director of a nonprofit called the Coalition of Black Social Workers. So I'm really thrilled to be here with y'all today. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
I'm Claudia Weber, spelled with 1 B. Until I was doged, I worked as a Catholic Charities caseworker, also helping with immigration and resettlement. But that stopped after many years of Catholic Charities doing that work. And we're waiting. We don't know. Nobody knows what would happen, like if that could be revived. But right now, I'm a retired social worker. I'd like to get to the bottom of who nominated me for this. And
we can help with that, maybe.
I had previous Metro experience in property codes and standards, and I think this is going to be a more meatier, meaningful group.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm Sarah Martin. I'm a civil rights lawyer with Horwitz Law. And I'm just happy to be here. In my previous life, I worked for the YWCA doing domestic violence awareness and community education and things of that nature. And then I went to law school, and here I am. So.
People's Republic of District 5 represent.
Welcome all. And before we proceed again, I think Dakota came in, just so you know that all the mics are live. Even when you whisper to me or to 2 people on your left, the leftist on your side, could be recorded. I'm just saying. We'll move through this. I think we have more than enough quorum. Yes?
Yes.
All right, thank you all for coming. I don't see any public comments or commentators. I think we're good to go there. Review and approval of minutes. Please have a look if you haven't looked already to see if there are any edits that need to be made. Any suggestions or questions or queries?
I move acceptance of the minutes as presented.
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hand. You good?
Yes.
Thank you all. Financial update, Edie Tucker.
Have we passed that out?
Yes.
As you see, it is a brand new. There have been no recorded expenditures today. Previous year would be FY25. It goes through a true-up/closeout period where we will get a final analysis. Metro has not completed that at all for anybody at this point.
Do we have any idea how long it'll be before we get it?
I think they try to do it by the end of this month.
Oh,
But
I'm impressed and surprised.
Yeah, we'll be slightly under. I'm guessing somewhere around 15 grand or so. We'll be under budget.
Okay. It's a new year, folks. Old business. Edie Tucker again with the ice cream partying and the no hit on my plate vest.
The ice cream party. No, we just listed for you on your we just wanted to keep you up to date on the number of events that we've had. We've had 2 ice cream socials, one at Centennial Park. We did a joint event with Metro Arts and their coffee talk at the 37208 building. We've had 6 No Hate on My Plate events, the last one being on Saturday, and this past Thursday, we had an event up at the African American Museum, which had several of our elected officials in attendance. And I also want to thank all of the commissioners who have attended events and the ones who also came to our facilitators training, which we had a large group of about 30 some odd people for that. So we're grateful for that. It's continuing to move on. We're trying to get ready for the next portion as it relates to building out the website with the toolkit and the toolbox for everything. But as you know, we're down to a very low staff level now, and we are hiring 2 people now. We're in the hiring process of that now, and we also have 2 others that we're still in the process of trying to get registers in that position so that we can begin this process. Just so you know, it takes probably 2 months to bring somebody on from start to finish in Metro. Once you make the request has to be approved. The job description has to be written and approved. It gets posted for X amount of time. Then they take it down and they rate all the applicants. And once they finish that, they give you a register as they have rated them. We're responsible for scheduling interviews of the people that we want to interview. We're also responsible for filling out their background check. You can't offer a position or anything until the background check comes back. Then you offer a person a job and you pick a start date. So it's about 2 months, and that's if everything goes well.
Will there be another facilitators training?
Yes, we just have not set a date yet. When we got to 36, we were really glad that we had such great interest in that. And I can't say thank you enough to Summer Ali, a former MHRC commissioner, and her organization, Leaders of Conversation, Phyllis Hildreth from American Baptist College, and Daoud from Faith and Culture Center, who have given of their time freely to help us work out what these dinners look like and keep us on task for what it is that we're trying to do with them. And we wouldn't have gotten this far without them.
All right, thank you, Edie Tucker. These have been fantastic. I attended the last one at the National Museum of African American Music along with new Commissioner Weber. She was there as well. And they've been fantastic. So I encourage you to all attend. And they do strike incredible conversations. There were some comments about like they were too much of talking to the choir, speaking to the choir at this last Thursday one. But I think when we go when it's a nighttime event, things change. Do we have say the dates to keep in mind?
They're all on your calendar and I've emailed you all about it.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, we have 2 coming up, the 21st and the 23rd. One will be at the Southeast Community Center, and the other one will be over in North Nashville at the Youth About Business. These are centered around teachers. And again, to your point, Chair Tran, we try to get desperate groups together. And to your point, Thursday, almost everybody in the room knew each other.
Yep.
So again, it's kind of like talking to the choir.
I intend to come to the 23rd at the Southeast Community Center. Is that correct? So that's in my neighborhood. And I purposely got another ticket so I have a friend who you know, and so I'm bringing.
You sure you have a friend?
She lives-
It seems very
is a
sus.
neighbor. So I'm bringing a neighbor with the purpose of like, she's not gonna be like everybody else.
Yeah, just to give context to our new commissioners, these are events that we hold and sponsor, and we bring different people together to talk about certain issues, not politically hot issues, but we ask like, what do you think builds community? What do you think creates or sows mistrust or whatnot, depending on the set of questions. So it's a great opportunity to meet face to face and basically break bread with each other and talk during these difficult, trying political times. So thank you all. The new business, the big business today. Welcome to the Metro Planning Department for coming to speak with us. I see the floor to you and all the hot mics. Yes.
We're really grateful for them to come today. MHRC has historically been concerned about the housing issue in Nashville. Early on, MHRC has published at least 3 different studies relating to housing over the years. And earlier last year, I'm gonna get the dates mixed up, the housing infrastructure report came out, and shortly after that, the unified housing, I almost had it,
You got it.
Is that it?
Strategy.
The unified housing strategy came out, which is a ambitious plan that we're really excited about, but also we want to make sure that as we look at it, that it's a long-term plan for addressing this chronic housing need that is going on. So we asked planning, and we hope that Greg's son is doing fine. Greg Claxton was going to be the presenter, but his son had a medical emergency today. And he sent his able and competent individuals to stand in for him. Katie Kamesis
You got it.
and Travis
Miller.
Miller. Don't help.
It's a hard one.
Please don't help. But we appreciate y'all preparing this presentation for us. And so I'm gonna give way to them. I don't know whether they're gonna do 2 parts or 1 part, but please write down your questions and they'll tell us what they need to tell us and we'll go from there. Thank y'all again for coming.
Oh, absolutely. Let me get up. You want me to turn this on? All right. Can you all can hear me? Can ITS hear me? Okay, good. We're good to go. They really were all hot. I should have just listened to you all. My name is Katie Kamesis, and what we're going to do today is I'm going to speak briefly about the H&I housing infrastructure study and give you an update on where we are with that study. Greg will come back to a future meeting to give you more detail on the recommendations that the study has put forward, as well as give you more detail on the historical research that went into the H&I study to understand the impact of zoning on communities of color and historically as well as currently. So I will kick us off by giving you just really a brief touch base on where we are with housing and infrastructure, and then I'll turn it over to Travis, who will give you a much more in-depth overview of the unified housing strategy. We're both open and welcoming of all of your questions. I think perhaps in the interest of saving time, if maybe you could hold your questions till the end of my presentation, and then we'd have discussion, and then once Travis kicks off, hold your questions to the end of his presentation and have discussion, if that works for you all. Does that work? Okay, great. All right, well, I'm gonna dig in. Just to kind of give you a high level sense of our study, as this study has evolved, the project team has started to think about it in 4 big phases. With the first phase really kind of kicking off in November of 2024, where we dug into the project in earnest. That phase was focused on assessing Metro's zoning code and infrastructure systems for negative impacts on housing supply, affordability, and equity. So there's a lot of technical work that went into that assessment, both including Metro planning staff, as well as using a team of consultants that's composed of both national and local experts on housing zoning codes and zoning code analysis. That work also included community conversations where we went to the community across the county and introduced individuals to the study, what it was seeking to do, what it was not, kind of giving a sense of what it was really focusing on, as well as giving the context of Nashville Next and how it related to the study. It was also a time for us to hear about what people were seeing in their neighborhoods, what was their experience of the housing market from their perspective, as well as the infrastructure that they encountered in their neighborhood, whether that's roads or stormwater, or even their access to libraries and grocery stores and that nature. So we had some very kind of helpful, meaningful conversations with people about what they were experiencing and the when it comes to the question of housing supply, affordability, and equity. And I should make a point of saying here that the unified housing strategy is looking at the universe of housing across, looking at the kind of the universe of housing in Metro Nashville. It's looking at both kind of the private side as well as housing that is subsidized by federal, state, and local funding. The housing and infrastructure study is really, it's almost one of the recommendations, funny enough, of the Unified Housing Strategy, and that is to assess the zoning code and the different regulations that shape the private market. So a lot of what we're talking about here is really focused on how do we make the private side of the market work a lot better so that it can give some relief to folks in the middle of the income spectrum, as well as folks who have to rely on subsidized housing as their housing choice. So just to give you a little bit of perspective on that. So as Mr. Tucker said, we released it. We took that technical analysis in what we heard from the community, and we released an initial findings and preliminary recommendations report at the end of March. It's 90 pages. It's a lot, but there's a lot of really good information in there. And it was really kind of just sharing what we found. And then as we moved into phase 2, which we're in right now, and completing, we built on those findings in order to think about what are potential recommendations to the zoning code that could improve, again, how the private market side functioned a little bit better. So the update of the Metro zoning code focused on improving the character of new development to create greater certainty, but for both neighbors and builders. So there's more predictability about what are tools that create more predictability of what's going to be developed in Nashville, as well as create new districts for smaller scale housing options. And we'll talk about that in a little bit once we pivot to talk about the recommendations a little bit more. As part of that phase, we did community workshops in May, and we also had work sessions with the Metro Planning Commission in order to kind of share some draft ideas about the recommendations and get feedback. So at the end of June, we took all of that work and developed the draft recommendations memo, which has been released and is on our website. And that's what we'll focus today on, is just giving you an overview of that memo. Before we do that, just to complete a sense of where we are and where we're going, phase 3 will be, if phase 2 is really thinking about what are potential new tools or changes to our zoning code to make available for use by builders, community members, property owners. Phase 3 is when we start to think about, well, how do we change the zoning map itself? So right now, we are thinking about Nashville Next as that guide of where we want to kind of manage move growth, and that's along the corridors and in centers. But in phase 3, we'll work with the community members and council members and really dive more deeply to look at, well, where are there potential opportunities to rezone properties in order to use primarily these new districts that we'll talk about. So that's when we'll get to the where. what will be informing that is an infrastructure assessment that we're currently working with other departments on. We plan to make that report, we expect that to be done in the fall of 2025. Once we have that insight into potential areas of infrastructure deficiency or areas where there's a lot of capacity, we'll use that to then meet with to start engagement with the community about where to start to use some of these new zoning tools, if that makes sense. And finally, this idea we have new tools, we start to use them in certain areas of the county. Then also this fourth phase is focused on a 2-year assessment of those new zoning districts and new zoning tools to make sure that they're working correctly and they're achieving the outcomes that we are hoping for. They're creating the buildings we want them to create and the housing opportunities we want them to create. And so that assessment will be based on feedback from neighbors, builders, and metro departments, and that's planned to extend to about 2028. But it'll flex once we start to get these things in place. So, yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
of course.
Okay, sorry. I have a question about the infrastructure assessment.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about that, are you talking specifically about like what a civil engineer would call an infrastructure, or are we talking more about like including like bikes and bikeways, sidewalks, roadways, but also grocery store accessibility, like open, like grassy, green accessibility? Are those being added into as assessment pieces?
Assessment will include both hard infrastructure, like you're talking about stormwater, roads, trying to think, sidewalks, all that. But then it will also include work on looking at the parks, community centers, libraries, grocery stores, childcare, and some of those other important community amenities that are needed in order to make, to provide a quality of life to any neighborhood across the city. So that we're working with those departments, whether it's parks or libraries or whatever, to be part of that assessment. Okay?
Questions now?
Sorry, I didn't know the rule. I came in late.
If you don't mind just waiting, let me get through
I
it.
thought you were finished, I'm sorry.
No, there's so much to talk about, but
the rule.
hopefully we can get to the end and then I don't want you to miss out on the UHS, which is a spectacular presentation in and of its own right. So the draft recommendations memo, these are the kind of major sections of it. The general project approach is where we pull in key findings from that initial findings document that are relevant to these recommendations, and kind of essentially create the context for why these particular recommendations are included in the report. It also has community engagement key takeaways, giving you a sense of what we've heard from the community. We will focus a little bit more on these middle two recommended phase changes to the zoning code and building code, an introduction to new zoning districts. That's really the bulk of the memo, is digging into the recommendations, and then it includes next steps. Let's see. Okay. So the engagement summary is we've engaged 537 community members engaged in phases 1 to 2. So as of now. Phase 1, you can see kind of a breakdown of the different types of engagement opportunities. Some were presentations to the joint transportation and infrastructure and planning and zoning committees, as well as planning commission presentations. Our community conversations. We also had in-person and virtual office hours to help people wrap their head around 90 pages of initial findings, kind of sitting down and talking to them about what were the key takeaways, what are their questions. As well as 21 internal and external stakeholder meetings. And we have a website which we update regularly that has extensive background information, both prior to the study, but then also context during the study, as well as video explanations of different concepts that this study is dealing with. So then we also have phase 2 is 4 council presentations, in-person and virtual workshops, and 9 in-person office hour sessions with practitioners to help us draft new districts, take a first pass at making sure that they are structurally workable before we share them with the community, and then 17 internal external stakeholder meetings. The idea is that the recommendations address these overarching goals, which are to improve the function and clarity of the zoning code and improve the compatibility between new construction and existing neighborhoods. That the recommendations add incentives to the zoning code for including attainable homes within market rate buildings, as well as that the recommendations create zoning options specifically scaled for middle housing. Which are more closely aligned with Nashville's housing policy goals and Nashville Next framework for managing growth. In addition to having goals that we're seeking for the recommendations to address, we also have 4 tests for all the recommendations. They are listed here and are part of the were captured in the initial findings report. That first one, is it supported by National Next, is incredibly important and will become even more important as we move into that phase 3 where we start to talk about potential changes to the zoning map. But then you have abundant housing. Will it support a housing market that provides better opportunities for Nashvillians? Necessary infrastructure, will it be supported? Will a recommendation be supported by infrastructure, either existing or planned? As well as distinctive communities, will it result in design and form of new construction that better matches its context, especially within or transitioning to neighborhoods? That idea of creating a kind of better quality of life for everyone. These are the draft recommendations at a high level. The study proposes phase changes to the zoning code and building code, and you can see there are 3 phases. So these are 3 different sets of changes that the study recommends. The first, building code changes. This is using 2 opportunities created by the state last year. One is to allow for taller single stair buildings in the building code. Right now, it's allowed up to 3 stories, and the idea of adjusting the building code and to allow single stair buildings up to 6 stories, which allow for more affordable or attainable kind of housing options. That is currently going through the IBC adoption process right now, and I believe the final reading is tonight. And then also with the building code changes to the building code that increase affordability for 3 and 4 family dwelling units. And so this is something that's still the changes to the code are still in development, but essentially thinking about how do we make that smaller scale multifamily that's just 3 or 4 units, like a quadplex. Are there ways to streamline the building code to make it more affordable? The really critical kind of tool out of this phase is the creation of 2 new zoning districts, which I've mentioned a couple of times before. These would be new zoning districts to add to the zoning code, so not replacing a zoning district or updating an existing zoning district. These would be the vehicle for, so it would be residential neighborhood and residential limited, which are the names of the districts. This is the vehicle that would be introducing the idea of middle housing into the zoning code. So these are smaller scale multifamily housing types that are, they run from like a townhome to a quadplex to something called a manor house, which is maybe the size of a large house, up to a courtyard apartment or low-rise flats, which are about 40 units. So the point is they are smaller scale multifamily that might be well suited for transitioning off the corridor and between the corridor and neighborhoods. And that's kind of generally the idea of where we think these would be best suited. These are, in addition to the new zoning districts, one of the critical aspects of the tool is that those housing types come with a little bit additional regulations called building standards, so that neighbors have a better sense of what is going to be developed, what those buildings will look like, and where they will sit on the lot. And builders themselves get more certainty and predictability because they know exactly what is the intent of that zoning district and the intent of those building types. Finally, the creation of the Attainable Bonus Program is another tool that we would recommend as part of that first phase. I know I'm taking up time, so I'll move a little bit more quickly. So SAS 2B would be focusing on changes to simplify and improve design quality of existing commercial and multifamily districts. This relates to what we call our conventional and alternative districts, and it gets really technical really fast. I'll let Greg really walk you through the details of this one. But all that to say, it seeks to simplify the code, in particular with a set of districts that are rarely used as part of rezoning. So are there ways to streamline the zoning code so that it's not as complicated as it is now? And it's about improving the bulk standards associated with their districts, so there's more predictable outcomes from builders and neighbors. And then task 2C is our final phase of recommendation, improving design quality and data expansion and simplifying requirements for 2-family homes in 1 and 2-family districts. This is meant to be a balanced and incremental change to the zoning code that provides more predictable outcomes to current standards. So standards within existing zoning code, or districts. And that's our 1-family and then 1 and 2-family districts. These are the measures, the recommendations within this phase include simplifying how Metro measures heights in the zoning code to make it easier for everyone involved to understand what is that standard. Reduce height in R and RS districts to increase compatibility with surrounding context, the neighborhood context. Simplify conditions for duplexes so it's easier for property owners to understand if they can build a duplex or not. And expand opportunities for the use of DADUs across the USD and potentially the GSD. So all of these recommendations are structured within the memo to explain what the barrier is that was found as part of that initial findings report, what the draft recommendation is, and the anticipated outcome or impact of that recommendation. Okay. So with that, the next steps are later this month. Each set of change will start to, as I said, they're phased. So the first would be that task 2A. We'll go through, start the process of a public engagement on the draft standards. The recommendations memo gives kind of a high-level view of the recommendations. The next step is to actually get the draft standards, the actual changes to the zoning code in the public realm, and for feedback from community members, builders, practitioners, advocates. So we will start that engagement later this month. And then once that engagement process has completed, we will start the process of planning commission, going to planning commission for 2 meetings, and then going to council as part of that public hearing. And those will both include community engagement opportunities in the form of public hearings. And then as I mentioned later this year, we'll be producing the infrastructure assessment report and beginning to work on that remapping phase. So I know that was a lot, and I'm not even like the full shebang. Greg really has so much more detail to share with you, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
My question is always about this, the community conversations and the public engagement.
Yeah.
You laid out a number of people.
Yeah.
How did you identify those people? And do you feel like that they were representative of the racial, socioeconomic, all the conditions of Nashville, Davidson County? How were they notified? Talk me through that process of how you found those people, and do they represent Nashville and not just certain segments of Nashville?
That's a great question, and I think that's something we're very, very mindful of. So I think the best is to focus on the community conversations and the workshops, because those were the ones where we went into the community. And so one of the strategies we used in order to reach as many people we could and get a diverse cross-section is those meetings were held at 6 different locations across the county. So we had for like the community conversations, we were in Bordeaux and Madison, as well as Green Hills, and I'm trying to think, just north of Antioch on Edmondson Pike at that library, and I think there was another one as well. But just to give you a sense, we tried to be geographically at Sunny West downtown in case that was easy to get to for anyone. So we tried to be geographically sensitive to where people were and be as close to them as we could. We just use the council members to help us get the word out about these meetings, as well as reaching out to community groups that we had connections with and neighborhood groups that we had connections with in order to help their networking and their ability to share the word. And that was similar for the public workshops. And I would say, I think that we did get a cross-section of Nashville. We always want to reach more people and even further into some of those harder to reach communities. But I wouldn't say that we reached, that everyone that attended really fully represented Nashville. So to compensate for that, for the public workshops, in May, we had a Spanish virtual workshop. We didn't have any attendees, but we did capture that recording and we're putting it on the website. So if someone wanted to access that, they can reach that information. The website itself is able to be translated into several different languages. And then we produced an executive summary of the findings memo in Spanish as well as in Arabic, and that's on the website. And we're working to do the same with the findings, the one we just released in June. So those were some of the ways that we tried to kind of reach as many people we could who, Nashvillians is from as many experiences and backgrounds as we could.
Great.
Yes.
Was this study done like pursuant to the grant funding you got from HUD last year?
So that's, Travis can speak to that more, and in fact, that grant funding doesn't fund either of these projects.
Okay.
He can speak to what it does fund. This study came out of a council resolution that
Okay.
was issued in March of last year, asking for a comprehensive and holistic look at housing supply and affordability and equity, as well as pairing it with an understanding of whether and where our infrastructure system lies and how it relates to potential housing growth opportunities.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Did I hear you say that something in here is that you're going to be reducing height in R and RS zoning?
One of the recommendations is to, I think the height currently in those districts is 3 stories, is to take it down to 2.5. And so again, that when we get to that phase of recommendations, that's something we would again bring to the community with specific language around what that change to that bulk standard table or the language in the code would be, so people could see exactly what we would be recommending.
Okay, that's something I'd love to flag for us, because when you're reducing that height, that means you're taking density out of those residential neighborhoods and continuing to force it onto pikes, as y'all know, which, the air quality is worse, you have a better chance of getting hit by a car. You're closer to public transit, but there is discussion now of whether it's equitable to force denser development onto Murfreesboro, Gallatin, et cetera, rather than letting people live in a neighborhood. So that's just something that I would flag.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I would say when Greg comes back, he can speak more to this than I can. But I think our initial assessment is that when of buildings that are 2.5 is they are generally the same square footage as 3. They're just different. They have a different form. They're just like deeper or wider. So, but he can give you a stronger.
Greg and I go way back.
Yeah, so he can give you a stronger understanding, or he can speak more to what they actually found and the details of it, and dig into that a little bit more with you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit more about the relationships that are sort of germane to the project? So I know you're the planning department, and your recommendations are going to the planning commission.
That's right.
And then what happens after that? How do you ultimately get to?
So the housing infrastructure study develops these reports, and those go to the commission, and they are they don't require a vote. It's really us reporting out on what our findings are and what our recommendations are. But then the next step would be for say for the 2 new districts, legislation, a council member could pick up the legislation and then start that process of essentially adding a text amendment to the zoning code. So there's a whole process laid out for when you adjust the text of the zoning code and what's required of it. And so we would follow that process. And these are some of the components of that process. I think what you're really asking is it would go to the commission who forms a recommendation about that text amendment and whether to add it to the zoning code, and then it's ultimately a council vote.
Yes.
And they are the ones who would make the decision about adding it. And so that's what's trying to be reflected here.
All right, is there a committee of the council that actually hears this kind of information and?
The planning and zoning committee, who I believe would be the ones to technically hear this text amendment of this kind. We have been going, I'm not sure if other committees would be brought in or otherwise consider it in light of the uniqueness of this study.
Great, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Hi there. So last meeting we figured out you guys are coming. I'm in college, so I decided I was gonna talk to my friends that are on campus about kind of what's going on. And we were home in Nashville, the 16 college campuses and post-learning centers. And so my question with the community engagement was, do you have any specific record of talking to college students, campus officials, or any school departments, because housing, transferring and going and trying to find somewhere affordable but yet close to campus, it's a very hard thing to do. So it's what was the engagement that way?
That's interesting. I'm trying to think. I know we had young people in terms of, I know one individual identified themselves as a high schooler, and I know we had other young people attend. I would say we did not, we didn't cite a meeting to be close to a college campus specifically, but it's great. What I can do is look back and see if we have any kind of indication that college students participated organically, and I can share that with you.
Awesome.
But it's also a great flag for us as we move forward for future engagement to be mindful of that population.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you for your time here today. I guess one of the things as I was reading the big plan was also trying to sort of hear it in connection with the executive summary that you all had put out as well. And the thing that came through to me in the executive summary over and over again is piecemealness.
Yes.
That was not only just a subject heading, but it was also a word that was used throughout the document. And an admission or / maybe even implicit frustration with being able to implement a lot of things that you felt were really important or necessary for the types of changes and, more importantly, coordination that you felt would be needed to get to any one of the goals that you had for yourself. And I was listening to the special meeting last week where you kind of went over this at the combined committee meeting at council. And this is still a concern for me, that even if we take any of the goals at their most optimistic, we believe these things will work, we come to some community consensus around the goals. But I sense both I'm reading a history that has kind of led to roadblocks a number of places, and I see hopes around maybe we can address this. Maybe we can bring the ways that you talked about creating plans that bring private enterprise and private development more on board with some of the things that you're proposing, feel like a way to sort of maneuver the system in a way as it currently sits, where a lot of the power sits inside private developers' hands. But I'm very worried that a lot of the hope of this document, even outside of the community conversations, is going to be held up in these forces that we've seen time and time again have kind of created roadblocks for us being able to create a more cohesive plan, or to even develop a strategy that really looks in these things in a whole cloth type of way. And I'm just wondering, as you've had other conversations in this sort of phase 2 process and you're really trying to move into the thick of this, what are you sensing from others about how we take that on, those challenges on, and how does the planning commission, the planning department itself see ways to move through these challenges that have been with us in the past and continue to be with us in the present moment.
Yeah, I think I maybe can start to speak to that, but I think ultimately, if I understand your kind of what you're asking for, I mean, I think the unified housing strategy is really the study that tries to get that big picture view of the whole housing market and the whole housing capacity of Nashville and help us see that bird's eye view so that there can be more kind of coordinated and strategic ways about addressing kind of the larger housing market and our larger housing goals. H&I thinks about it in terms of if we can just do a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there incrementally, we can create more capacity within the zoning code's ability to create more housing. And so we have been working with, at least internally, with our codes department, our stormwater department, across departments in order to make sure that these recommendations are coordinated and, you know, we've got a kind of we're all on the same page about what it's going to take in order to move them forward in terms of implement them if they are adopted. So we are working internally in order to prepare for that. I would say the other thing is that 2-year assessment period that I mentioned at the beginning, at least for the tools that come out of this study, it's going to be an opportunity to, if there continues to be barriers and roadblocks, to identify them and then potentially update those tools. If that's in fact, if it's a technical problem of the tool, to make them better. I think the other kind of the word piecemeal, it was used a lot in that report to talk about infrastructure delivery and how that is a particularly hard challenge for Metro and for Nashville. And more thinking around that and more kind of findings on that front will be part of that infrastructure assessment. And so it will, you know, we can have kind of a more kind of robust conversation about potential opportunities to answer your question in terms of infrastructure later on in the fall once we've gotten through our own assessment. Does that answer your question, sort of?
I mean, I packed a lot in there, so I appreciate that. I think that the main thing for me is what I was reading, quite bluntly, is as much as we coordinate here, we're running into that headwinds from the state over and over and over again, right? And that there's a historical pattern there. There's a present day concern there, and so the times that we had the city, county, the metropolitan government has tried to take initiative on that. I mean, the classic example is sidewalks. We got stymied. And that was a infrastructure question that we were trying to answer through development, right? That it was tied as these developments went into place, that sidewalks had to be put in place. And so I'm just concerned that as we try to coordinate across the district, across the county, that we have seen a history of challenges coming from outside the county to trying to unify our plans like that and create cohesive strategy. And so I'm wary, hopeful, but very wary.
I appreciate that. Well, I think we'll have more to say on that front in the fall, but I appreciate hearing your concern and your wariness and taking it back to the team. Yes, sir.
So I have a series of questions about the long plan, but I'm wondering, should Travis present? And then
I would say I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I think Travis has even more depth to share with you about the unified housing strategy, so I think it makes sense to switch to him, and he may be able to speak to your question. And if not, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer it. And I'm also happy to jump back up if it's really an H&I question. Yes, sir.
Katie, just one question. You mentioned about trying to reconcile new construction with existing neighborhoods. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that strategy or that ideology is?
Yeah, I think that's really captured in this task 2 and task 3 for the most part. there's a little bit with the task A with the building code changes, but this is about, recognizing that in both our commercial and multifamily districts, primarily along the corridors, as well as in our neighborhood districts, there is a sense that the new construction that's being built is out of scale or kind of not compatible with the existing context. So these two sets of changes or recommendations are would put forward draft ideas for how to tweak those existing districts in order to create more that new construction is more compatible with the kind of a neighborhood context or the existing context. So in this case, it's making kind of small tweaks to the existing commercial and multifamily districts. It's shifting over to kind of so that they have improved design quality and more predictability on what the outcomes are. And in this phase, it's looking at the a single family as well as the 1 and 2 family districts. That idea of turning the height down a little bit, as well as simplifying conditions for duplexes, so it's easier for a property owner to know if they can build a duplex on a property or not, as well as some tweaks to the standards related to a DADU and opening up the opportunity for DADUs to a broader part of the county. So those are some of the ways those are some of the recommendations that are impacting kind of existing districts and the new construction that would potentially come into those districts. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, kind of, sort of, but I don't want to hold it up. I'm good.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. We can touch base afterwards, and I can answer your question. Okay, thank you, everyone. Let me switch to Travis.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sorry Greg made you do this.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime we get to talk about zoning code changes. Okay, all right, if you need anything, you know where I am.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you all for inviting us here to share about the Unified Housing Strategy. Before I kind of get into it, can I see a raise of hands of who is taking a look at some of the documents? I just want to make sure if there's things in here that people are familiar with to do a little lighter on. Okay, cool. So then I'll do a more general look at this key findings.
Travis, excuse me, let me just interject. I was looking to see who all raised their hands. We sent all of these total reports to all of you. So it's just interesting everybody didn't raise their hands. Just to notice that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Travis.
You're all good.
Did you really have to call us out like that? I mean, the shade just went.
No one's safe. No one's safe.
Go ahead.
But to start off with just kind of a quick overview of the UHS, this is a call to collective action as Katie had shared. This is looking at both our public side but also our private side. How can we get our corporate and philanthropic partners to the table as well to deliver on our housing needs? So this is looking at how we can get all of our systems and resources together to kind of hit 4 main pillars that we look at in housing of creating new, preserving our existing housing, keeping people who are housed in their homes, and connecting people to resources. This strategy is also intended to be a living strategy that will be responsive to market conditions, to changes in needs here in Nashville, and really the community's needs as well. To share kind of how it's broken up, there are 4 core components of the Unified Housing Strategy. So the executive summary is a more quick overview of the UHS because Katie said that hers was long. I got her beat, about double at around 200 plus pages for the full Unified Housing Strategy. But that executive summary really does hit the high level pieces and then should be able to point you kind of within the 200-page document to learn more about the specific strategies, specific key findings, to do some more digging there as well as kind of a roadmap to that document. But speaking of a roadmap, we also have a 10-year implementation plan. So out of these 43, I believe 43, 40 plus, I'll say, to protect the number, each action has a implementation broken down with the key partners, prioritizing when these actions should be taken in this 1 to 3 year period, 3 to 5 year period, or throughout the whole 10-year kind of plan's life span for right now. But this is supposed to be our roadmap for taking those actions and putting them into implementation. And then to build off of that as well is our annual policy priorities that we will release annually following the passing of the fiscal year budget, to give more in-depth information on the actual implementation for that upcoming year, so that community members can know what to expect, builders can know what to expect, our philanthropic community can know where they can be brought in and give a better look at to what the upcoming year is going to be and how we'll try to achieve those UHS goals and actions in that coming year. As a heads up, we are hoping to get that released by the end of this month and to have more information out there for those. But I do want to also start off and say what will not be in the unified housing strategy due to some of the roadblocks that were mentioned earlier. We aren't able to mandate in our zoning code affordability or utilize affordability as a deciding factor in zoning changes. We're also not able to interact with private sales, so those would be sales that don't have any metro funding tied to that project. That is off limits for us. And then we cannot impose rent control here in Nashville, so capping rents or go above and beyond the tenant protections set at the state. And I will say that with a caveat to the projects that we fund and we have our subsidies in them, we have a little bit more leeway where we can be more protective on the tenant protection side and have more control on raising rents, because we'll have the area median income and rents published every year. And then also for zoning requirements, we have been recently allotted some more leeway there with voluntary zoning incentives. Katie had mentioned that with the attainable bonus program, but those would be completely voluntary programs to get more affordable housing. And to set the stage of what is affordable, we're talking about it here at Metro. We're looking at housing that's affordable to households at or below 80% of the area median income. That'll be on the next slide here to see what that area median income is, but that's published every year by HUD. And that's what we use at the federal level for affordability requirements. So we keep that consistent with the programs and affordability that we're looking at here as well. It is important to note that our AMI does include a 10-county census tract that includes counties such as Rutherford, Williamson County. So it changes, kind of skews what the numbers are, but that's why we want to look at 80% and below for what we're looking at. This chart here shows 2024's area median income. So this is what is present in the Unified Housing Strategy, but we do have updated numbers on our website as well as on our housing dashboard as well. And you'll see that 80% of the area median income for a one-person household was $59,500 or $850. For a four-person household, that was at $85,500 or $500. And so that's the kind of top of that 80% threshold, and we're looking for housing below that as well. As a heads up for what is 2025, before you have to go to the website, I did jot that down here. So 100% of the area median income is $80,400 for a one-person household. For a four-person household, that comes out to be $114,800. And then again, at that 80% threshold that we were looking at for our affordability, that's at $54,300 or $64,300. Sorry, can't read my own handwriting sometimes. And then for a 4-person household, that's at $91,850. So those are the people living and making Nashville run. We need these people, we want these people here because they deserve to be here. If they are working in Nashville, they deserve to have housing here for them. So based on those 2024 numbers, a few examples of the people that would be potentially living in affordable housing here in Nashville would be our family social workers at that 80% of the area median income, our hairstylists are at that 60%, our hotel clerks at 30 or 50% or below, and then someone working minimum wage at below 30% of the area median income. And then through this unified housing strategy, 6 key themes rose from our community listening sessions through our public survey that was on our website as well. These 6 key themes were an increased housing demand, a lack of affordability, a lack of housing choice, inaccessibility of home ownership, the risk of housing loss, and difficulty navigating programs and resources. So I'll go a little bit into each of these key findings to set kind of the stage of where Nashvillians feel they are at and what we're seeing at in our housing market as well. So first, to kick us off with an increased housing demand, we've probably heard of the supply and demand argument, and so we have to bring it up here. Nashville has a strong economy with plentiful job opportunities that are making people want to move here. But on top of that, we're also seeing smaller household sizes. So even if new Nashvillians weren't coming, we're seeing that the number of households searching for those housing opportunities has becoming increased as well. And when there's not enough supply, as we're seeing with our supply constraint, the prices begin to rise, and we'll go into that a little bit. But we've seen an overall housing production drop following 2008. It's kind of picked back up here, as you've probably seen the plenty of cranes that were around Nashville not too long ago. And our constrained housing supply really is affecting our households that need housing affordable at 60% or below of the area median income. And so to kind of visualize where we're at with our supply, this figure shows from 2010 on the number of households versus the number of homes available to these households. And so there are a couple of things here that I'd like to point out. Specifically in this 30 to 60% of the AMI and 60 to 80%, you'll see a stark decrease from 2010 on, and then kind of leveling off. And you'll see a very similar increase in 60 to 80% AMI. And so that is not suggesting that we got rid of those housing opportunities in the 30 to 60 band and just created a whole new set of opportunities in 60 to 80. Those opportunities have just become more and more unaffordable. So we see that constrained supply has become even harder below 60% of the area median income. And there's a huge gap here between the number of homes available and the number of households. And that causes a ripple effect across the entire income spectrum here, where people who don't have affordable homes at less than 30% of the area median income may need to stretch what little they have to get into that 30 to 60 or be unhoused, but also the 30 to 60% of the area median income can't find an option that would be within their band and then would take a housing opportunity that would be affordable to someone less than 30% of the area median income. So that's just a quick look at that ripple effect that's felt across the entire spectrum. And with the lack of housing affordability, we're seeing rental costs here in Nashville, Davidson County being far higher than what would be affordable to the median renting household and affordable to the median householder with a college degree. So you'll see in green, affordable to a median renting household, there's a $300 gap between what is the average rent and what would be affordable, and a $600 gap in orange here for the rent affordable to a median householder with a college degree.
Real quick, is that a 1-bedroom?
I can double check. I believe this is an average across the entire No, it should be one bedroom looking at these numbers, but I can double check and get back with you for sure.
Logically, that's a one
Yes,
bedroom.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, but that same effect is being felt across all of the bedroom sizes. And when we're looking at affordability, we also have to look at cost burdenness. So if you are technically able to afford this apartment or this house, but if you're paying over 30% of your monthly income, that's considered being a cost burden. And so you'll see here that both renters and owners are experiencing high levels of cost burden, but we can even break that down and see that our single parent household renters are experiencing a cost burden on this rate at around 74%. And our communities of color, we see 54% of Black renters and 52% of Hispanic renters being cost burdened, compared to 47% of white renters, and Hispanic homeowners experiencing a higher cost burden at 29% of Hispanic owners, compared to 22% of Black homeowners and I get the right statistic, 21% of white homeowners as well. So you can see that this is not just a problem that's affecting everybody equally, and when we break down the demographics, what we saw in housing infrastructure at the historical look is still affecting today's renting prices and incomes. So kind of related to a lack of housing affordability is a lack of housing choice. And so one quote that we heard at our community listening sessions was that I would like to continue to live in Nashville, but the cost of housing and other necessities has me considering moving to another part of the county, which would then increase my commute and my gas expenses. And so that is an example of driving until you qualify, but it's also an example of you may have a cheaper rent, but you're still spending that much money to get to your house or get to your work, get to your friends, get to your support system. And we see that the lack of housing affordability is so dire that it is the only thing that people can think of when they are looking for a housing opportunity. Looking at our community listening sessions, we heard majority of attendees not list something outside of affordability when asked the question of what are you looking for in housing. And again, this is something that's felt across vulnerable populations, even harder. Our justice impacted individuals have an even more constrained supply of housing choices due to systemic barriers, such as getting screened out right away for background during a background check, but also our Nashvillians living with disabilities who do not have the accessible options available and thus are forced to potentially live in substandard conditions or live in a substandard area compared to their need as well. And we see a misalignment in our housing production that we've seen and the needs of our community. So here on this figure, you'll see households with 4 or more people in this light blue, and in this darker blue are rental homes with 3 or more bedrooms. And when you're at or below 50% of the area median income, the options just are not there for families to have the needed space for their household. And we also see a need for greater geographic diversity. We see that a lot of our naturally occurring affordable housing, so housing that we don't have any funding in, but it's just affordable due to other market conditions, that's situated in areas such as Antioch and outside of our urban core. And we see also with our income restricted properties that being outside of our urban core as well, focused in our north and south parts of Nashville as well. Working on through this here, we have the inaccessibility of homeownership. So we've talked a lot about both renters and homeowners, but we really see an accessibility of home ownership. So if we look at our median household incomes here, broken down just by racial demographics, our Hispanic and Black households have lower median incomes than our Asian Pacific Islander or white households. And when you even look at ownership rates, though, that gap is as wide as well. So we see our Hispanic and Black homeowner or Black households having at or below 40% ownership rates compared to Asian Pacific Islander and white households at around that 60% ownership rates. And then even if you are able to find an affordable property, you have your house, there's the risk of housing loss that we're seeing both from both homeowners and renters being shared at our committee listening sessions, but also if we look at eviction filings, they've been up 45% compared to pre-pandemic levels, with the highest rate recorded in February of 2024 at 1,478 filings. And so you have that housing opportunity, but you could be without it the next day. And so these maps here come from a market value assessment from the Reinvestment Fund, looking at our displacement risk ratios and kind of our highest displacement risk areas. And so in those dark orange colors with the highest displacement risk ratio, that'll be in kind of that northern eastern parts of Nashville, and then South Nashville as well. And that's also shown here in our highest displacement risk areas with our highest pressure with new investment goes in. There be a pressure for displacement in North Nashville and kind of along our pikes down here, Southeast Nashville as well. And then finally, it was shared there was a difficulty navigating our programs and resources. So there is no one-stop shop to find all the resources available. And so if you don't know where to look, you don't know that it exists. And so that is one strategy, one action that we have in our unified housing strategy, to create that one-stop shop, to be able to find the resources you need when you need them. And even if people do know where to look, many residents are still unaware that the housing program is for them. Like we showed this chart earlier, at 80% of the area median income at $64,300, people may not know that that is the cutoff. And so that's something that we need to be more explicit about in our programming, but also when we're sharing kind of what our numbers are when we're looking at affordability as well. So that was a lot with our key findings, but kind of, I guess, the biggest finding about how much housing we need, HRNA Advisors, the consultant firm that we worked with on this strategy, estimated that Nashville will need roughly around 90,000 new homes in the next 10 years. So that comes out to roughly 9,000 new units annually. And so that does include both affordable and market rate units. So that's our total need. And that, to kind of put that in perspective, that is higher than the housing growth that we saw since 2015, which was around 7,000 new units per year, but lower than that construction boom that we saw since the pandemic. That was around 14,000 new homes. So we'll have to find a way to get into that 9,000 mark based off of our needs here. And when we're looking at our needs, we also looked at our needs for renting, but also home ownership. And based on our demand trends and what we've been seeing here in Nashville, based off our lack of ownership supply, is that there's a need for at least half of these new homes to be for sale properties, to create opportunities for home ownership due to our supply being limited since 2008. But also when we're looking at rentals, we see that a lot of our rental properties are being created in downtown and midtown, which due to land prices and higher construction costs have led to these properties not being affordable to the people that could be utilizing them. And again, we saw that our biggest gap was for households earning at or below 30% of the area median income. And so we see a need to add 20,000 homes for families at or below 60%, but again, with that priority at less than 30% AMI, and where we're looking at deeply affordable housing in our programming. And I touched on this earlier, but that ripple effect, how supply constraints in one part of the income spectrum is affecting all the other parts of the income spectrum as well. So then the meat and potatoes of what we're going to do after we saw these key findings and the housing that we need is our strategies. So there are 7 strategies that hit those 4 pillars of creating new, preserving existing, preventing displacement, and connecting people to resources. But those strategies need us to have an aligned ecosystem and resources to be able to act upon them. So I'll go through here each strategy at a high level, and then I've highlighted a few actions that I believe that this commission would be interested in potentially exploring further, or just knowing that they are in the unified housing strategy without having to go digging for them as well. I do apologize if I've missed any that would be of interest to this commission, but I hope that we can kind of find those in this discussion as well at the end here. So strategy A is to align the housing ecosystem, focusing on creating that high functioning ecosystem that is needed to more effectively address our housing needs. So a couple of key actions here is creating a position in the mayor's office to do interdepartmental and executive level coordination, but also creating an interdepartmental and interagency working group that has collaboration and accountability built in so that we are all on the same page when we're moving forward on housing. And expanding our city's capacity to lead and implement our housing initiatives, and enhancing the support that we have for our development partners as well. So this again will serve all Nashvillians, as it's the kind of center of all of these other strategies to be successful. And it'll address our ongoing fragmentation of housing efforts between different agencies and departments to create a more organized, responsive, and innovative system. So this strategy A, action 2 of increasing the capacity and expertise of metro agencies, either internally or through external partners. This will be a publicly led initiative. We face significant limitations in our ability to do underwriting to see where our funding can go to the highest and best use when we're looking at say the Barnes Fund as an example of one of our tools. When we're looking at how much funding needs to go into a deal, we don't have the ability to properly underwrite that currently. But also a few limitations include asset management and compliance, which these all hinder the deployment of our resources that we already have. And so if we can create a more bolstered capacity within our team, we can be able to act at a higher degree and higher level. Strategy B is fortify our funding and resources. So this will focus on expanding and diversifying our funding and other resources that support affordable housing. So maximizing our existing tools like the Barnes Fund that I had mentioned, but building stronger partnerships with our philanthropic and corporate sectors, and establishing that underwriting capacity as well for making sure that that funding goes to the right places. So this will serve all Nashvillians in need of affordable housing, particularly, again, those earning at or below 60% of the area median income, as our rising housing costs require us to be very optimized within our existing programs rather than creating a plethora of new programs that will maybe have those same issues, being able to fortify the existing ones as well. And our federal, state, and local funds are not enough to meet the housing needs that we need, and so that's where that corporate and philanthropic relationship is going to be crucial. Strategy C, which is to build new housing. This will focus on increasing our overall housing supply with a strong emphasis on rental options for low and moderate income homeowners. So one key action is to evaluate and adjust zoning and land use policies through the housing and infrastructure study, but also develop a mixed income housing finance toolkit, and so that we can have more mixed income development throughout Nashville, and we're not concentrating 100% affordability in certain parts of Nashville, and we're able to create more affordable options throughout the county as well. Utilizing our publicly owned land for affordable and mixed income housing development, and prioritizing those deeply affordable units in our existing housing programs. And that also includes prioritizing our income restricted units for vulnerable populations as well. So strategy C, action 16 of developing that mixed income housing finance toolkit and investing in sophisticated underwriting and finance capacity to support. So we see that mixed income developments promote economic integration that offers benefits like improved amenities, safety, mental health, and educational opportunities. And so a locally driven financing campaign would allow us to create those mixed income communities and create those mixed income developments as well. Strategy C, action 18, prioritizing new income restricted housing for vulnerable residents. those including families with children, older adults, persons with disabilities, and justice impacted individuals. Our new affordable rental options need to prioritize these populations as they are the ones facing the biggest constraints in our existing housing supply. Another population here that we're looking at with our older adults is we have heard in our community listening sessions a desire to maybe downsize and find something that would fit their needs. And again, that would create a new option, but maybe there are not enough options out there, so we need to create those opportunities as well. Strategy C, Action 19, prioritizing the development of deeply affordable housing within our existing programs. So again, our biggest gap is at that 30% or below, or deeply affordable housing. And producing these units is a particularly challenging initiative, as it has much higher construction costs versus what the development will take in their revenue to be able to pay for those construction costs. And that's where we need to come in and be able to have those subsidies to cover that gap and be able to actually be having these projects be built. Strategy D, supporting homeownership opportunities. So this will focus on expanding access to affordable home ownership and supporting existing homeowners to promote stability and generational wealth. A couple of actions here before going into some more are leveraging our land use policies, directing our public funds towards households with the greatest barriers to home ownership, and expanding our programs that assist current homeowners with maintenance and affordability. So leveraging our land use to expand the availability of entry-level home ownership. I believe Katie really hit the mark there with the housing and infrastructure, focusing on being able to have middle-income housing, or not middle-income housing, middle housing, yes. So those different typologies that have different sizes, that create more naturally occurring affordable at that middle income range as well. With Action 22, focusing our public funds for home ownership on those facing systemic barriers, prioritizing first-time home ownership and funding first-generation home buyers as well. We should also be looking in neighborhoods that have been historically disinvested and have not had the opportunities that other neighborhoods have for home ownership opportunities. And then strategy D, Action 25, identify partnerships to promote estate planning for Nashvillians with a focus on marginalized populations. So one thing that we see in affecting different populations with home ownership is the lack of legal right or legal estate planning to pass down home ownership opportunities from generation to generation. And so we see a need to be able to have a program or funding source to promote that estate planning so that home ownership can stay within families and does not get lost as it goes down the line. And then finally, in strategy D and Action 27, supporting programs that help keep homeowners safely housed through home repairs, accessibility modifications, and opportunities to create passive income. So there are a lot of programs here in Nashville that do focus on this maintenance and home repair to keep people in their houses. We need to remain funding these and expand the level of funding that we have for these programs as well. Strategy E, increasing supportive housing opportunities. So this one really focuses on creating and prioritizing permanent housing options for individuals transitioning out of homelessness. Key actions here include advancing the Homeless Planning Council strategic plan, prioritizing vouchers for those transferring out of or at risk of homelessness, exploring new funding sources for rental assistance and supportive services, and developing a specific strategic plan for creating more permanent supportive housing for those with complex needs. So permanent supportive housing combines both the housing opportunity itself to get off of the street, but the wraparound services needed to stay in that housing unit.
Hey Travis, all this I think we can read, and it's a lot of information, and I think at this point, for us to sit here and take it all in and process it is going to be really hard. If you can direct us to read the report, right, and the specific strategies, because to go through this line by line is going to be difficult. Because I think that commissioners would like to have questions now.
Yeah.
And in the future, as we move along, but it's 5:30. And I wanted to do this because I want to kind of, every time there are issues like this and these studies, there's the bigger picture and then the details in the weeds. So I wanted to set the framework that for the commission, that there are big questions that we need to ask. And I'll start this with a hypothetical situation. If a set of tornadoes came in and wiped out 4,500 homes and made 4,500 families houseless, homeless, unhoused, then we would act with greater urgency, right? That 4,500 number is actually the number of MNPS families that are unhoused. And this to me is hard because I think this is what Commissioner Johnson was saying in terms of piecemeal, is that the pace of this does not address those families who don't have a house tonight.
Right.
And so to me, that's hard for me. That's like, we're gonna get into this huge fight between NIMBYism and YIMBYism, and it's gonna last multiple community meetings, and we're gonna just get all pissed off at each other for nothing, I feel like. So there's that question. So that I want, for the study, I'd like to have like urgencies, like how do we address, I mean, 4,500 is the number of MNPS families. We're not including individuals, we're not including people outside the system. That's just a number that we have now. And nothing in this addresses that, nothing. Like there is no action, there's no like support, there's no like, do this, right? So that's my question. Maybe that's in a metro planning aspect, but there's at least 4,500 families that need help today, tonight, right? The other thing is that the number of units for 9,000 that are needed are confusing to me, and I'm getting some clarification. But on page 108, there's like, we need 9,000 annually, right, for immediate housing. But then like 9,000 is the overall number given, right? So I know this is a living document and things will change. So I think some clarification of that, like clarification of like 9,000 housing units. We keep saying middle income, and then we're like, we'd like to, emphasize more in terms of affordability. But what is that? What does that look like? What does it look like broken down? And the other thing is, this is just the reality, and this is not your fault, but there's a new big anti-American bill that was just passed by the federal government. People will lose SNAP, people will lose their health care, and that number is going to increase dramatically. We could do the math to figure that out, but I think that it would be misleading for Metro to go with this 9,000 number going forward, right? So, I mean, I have and then there are other questions that are still missing in this document. I sat through so many Envision, Casey and Envision Edge Hill meetings. That's like half a page dedicated to those public housing that the Metro runs. And we did this before COVID. We like sat down, Jim Harrison, I questioned his math, I played with little blocks, envisioned this and that. Where's Section 9 housing? Right, that's not there. And then the other, like, these are the big concepts that I'm like, what is going on here, right? Like, because I think there's so many, and then the other thing is, this is not my specialty, but the lines in here about like short-term rentals just it seems disingenuous, that short-term rentals help or like barely nudge the market. Hotel rates for house ownership for investors, we all know, I think it just rises prices, right? So to me, the question is like, if we look beyond building homes and rezoning, what would it look like to literally clamp down on like Airbnb regulations?
We tried, the state preempted us.
But we can, to regulate them.
I mean, you're completely right.
I understand, but
we
like,
tried.
I understand, but to regulate them, to be like, I have friends and colleagues who ran an apartment in the Gulch, and the whole building is Airbnb. I know it's not zoned for that, right? But they moved because it's all Airbnb. So are we regulating these short-term rentals? Because I think the numbers in here are like, there's 9,000 short-term rentals, 9,000 is the number we need annually, right? So these are the kinds of, I guess, the conceptual aspects that are both immediate and address the most urgent people, right? And I agree that there are college students, that there's middle housing and all that stuff, and that comes down the pipeline. And I do appreciate very much all the parts where like we have to like keep the people who are here in these housing units. And the other thing that's really hard about this, and when the fight comes in about zoning, I wanted to ask you how this process is going to work out. Because when it's NIMBYism versus yes people, those NIMBY people actually own the homes already. The people we're building for, they have nothing at stake, and they're working, they're picking up their kids, they're sitting in traffic. It's the landowner. Like, so even if we do outreach, and I appreciate the outreach, these hypothetical people have they don't have the time and the capital to be there. So these are like future advocates of something they don't have. And so whenever I go to these meetings, and the other side has like lobbyists, they have like paid professionals, right? And on the yes side is like volunteers, non-for-profits, budgets are being slashed, doged, whatever you want to call it. And so like these questions of these processes is what I'm like the big questions, right? Before we get into like the specific areas. Because the rate and the impact of this is, if I'm looking for a house to like downsize, I can wait 10 years, 15, whatever, right? But there are people impacted today. And what I guess what I'm trying to say is the strongest verb to me in there, and the strongest verb in your presentations is incentivize. Developers and philanthropic folks. That's just like, please, come help us. Or there is nothing, like we can build a stadium. We took $760 million of city bonds to do this, plus the state kicked in, right? Can we imagine like saying like, let's put bonds out. Like we gave Ingram a 99-year lease for that land around the stadium, around the NSC stadium. We are building a $2 billion football stadium, right? That we use one out of every 7 days for a third of the year. And hopefully we'll get the Super Bowl for a long weekend, right? And so to me, it's like, I'm going to be too exhausted to fight the NIMBYism and YIMBYism fight. And the efficacy of that is a question, but like, I'm just like wondering, have we, for example, asked the families who need stuff, like, what do you need to pay your rent? Is it childcare? Is it healthcare? Is it free buses?
Living wage.
What would help? A minimum wage? Because we keep and then the other question is like, ideally, if we could do this, would it just look like the Gulch? If we changed all the zoning, I can't afford the Gulch, right? And so even if we did change the zoning, does it change the market? These are like just big questions, and the details, I think other like planning folks and developers can do that. But as from an equity standpoint, right? It's the classes that they're out there busting their asses trying to get places sitting in the heat, right? That I'm concerned about. And so
If I may add to that, it's the stat that wasn't anywhere in here of the 99% of Nashville neighborhoods are out of reach for your average Black or Hispanic family, right? That's nowhere in here. How do we fix that right now? Not after we do an assessment after 2028. And I'm not yelling at planning, but again, to your point, I think it's where's the will?
Yeah.
And I would just say, I think that was what Greg was planning to come and talk to you all about.
That was what? I'm sorry.
That was what Greg was planning to come and talk to you all about in more detail. So we'll get back to it, at least in the sense of like digging into that and understanding how these recommendations relate to that.
I love information, okay? I love studies, but I'm tired of studies. We knew so much of this when we did Nashville Next 10 years ago. This is just exacerbated. These problems were pre-existing. We've done almost nothing in the last 10 years. And if I hear public-private partnership one more time, I'm gonna puke all over this table. Metro has land. Let's build the housing on the land that we own, like other cities have done. We have plenty of money for things that the wealthy want in this town, where are the resources for everybody? We just passed a massive tax increase. Like, what are the people in the bottom 50% getting from that? I'm tired. So I don't want to do any more studies. I want to look at what other people have done in cities that has worked and do that. Anyway, thanks for having me.
Welcome, Sarah. Do you mind if I
Yeah.
respond? Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so with this strategy, it is more than just the study. I did want to provide that historical and current context without, since Greg wasn't here. I do apologize for missing the mark on that. This strategy is for these next 10 years, what has worked in other places and what can we do to bring it here to create these housing opportunities. I know 10 years, it doesn't affect today's need at the dramatic level that it needs to. But these are kind of the stepping stones that we can take to create the housing that we will need for the problem that might occur in 10 years from now as well, to fortify that solution as well. I also agree. I think there is a pressing need that needs to be addressed with the 45,000, right? 45,000? 4,500, sorry. MNPS families that need housing today. These strategies are meant to incentivize and create more of those opportunities that we can have here in Nashville. Due to the kind of existing limitations that we have within the state, we do need to focus on incentivizing these opportunities, as that is our way forward. And I think what we'll see in these annual policy priorities as we come out in each year will be those more concrete next steps for how we'll hit that 9,000 mark that year, or hit that priority that year, and kind of see how we've done throughout the past years as well. So we are wanting to keep this conversation rolling with community members, the people that need this housing, and seeing what we're seeing in our market. What do we need to change? Are these strategies that we created or put out in 2025 or 2024 the same strategies that are needed in 2027?
Yeah.
I mean, okay. That's what I was just gonna, I mean, we don't know what 10 days from now is gonna look like. And you're trying to talk about 10 years from now. I do a lot of work with nonprofits. I help them with their strategic planning. Their strategic plans are 2 and 3 years.
But housing
And-
takes a lot more time than that.
Okay,
It
we can
doesn't
do
have
it
to,
5.
But it kind of
But
does if you wanna
10
do it correctly.
Why can't we just sell the global mall to a developer and let them build?
Well, because then you
affordable
have
housing on it?
absolutely no capabilities of cost, if you're
We have
selling,
incentivizes.
but but you can't, but if you want to create affordable housing that is going to stay affordable for the long term, which is a huge problem.
Bob Mendez
Right.
just did it on the East Bank. We got 99 years down there.
So, but what I'm saying is I think that took time. It takes time to create those contracts and housing is just, it doesn't pop up like automatically, and in order to do it correctly, you're gonna wanna do infrastructure. You have to have, if we wanna have our affordable housing be capable of being gotten to, sorry, my words aren't, it's been a long first day back from vacation, but you have to have sidewalks, you have to put in supermarkets, like there are so many things, you can't just create
Can I
community like that.
interject, because historically speaking, what's happened is that public housing has been stigmatized and be eroded by privatization. For example, right now with the Envision project, it would go from publicly funded housing, Section 9 housing, all to Section 8 housing. So technically in 40 years or 20 years, there'd be not one public house in Nashville. So it's actually not that we can't do it, it's that we are privatizing everything.
Which is why but that's the way that I heard Whitney say is like, let's just sell the global mall. Well, if you sell the global mall, then you're not protecting your
But what I'm saying is that
capabilities of
I think
people.
we're
I may
all,
have been less specific with my
Sorry,
words
sorry,
than I
that's just
perhaps
the way
could
that
have.
I
but
heard it.
my emphasis is that like, this is a public emergency.
Yeah.
If there was a tornado that came today and tomorrow, we'd be out there with our chainsaws, helping everybody, but these are families we don't give a shit about.
Right.
Right? And so that's the issue to me. It's a public crisis. The deception of this is that it's a slow-moving crisis. And we don't see people because that's how we build our southern cities.
Yes, that's how
Right?
we build city, not
But
just
I also wonder, like, we have a lot of state limitations, and I'm just wondering about those and the specificities of those, because things that we might see happen in a Chicago or a Denver to create affordable housing, we might have limitations within our own state because of the laws that are passed in our state to backlash against us. And so I'm wondering what those, and that's just too much for today, but what those laws are, and could we partner with our outside counties that are going to start to be incredibly impacted by the need for affordable housing coming forward, to work with our legislators to backtrack on those laws that are impacting and stifling our ability to be as creative as we want to be, like the Denvers, like all of those other places. Sorry, I'm done now.
I did just want to second those comments. I think it is a emergency that we're in. Like, we're in a time where folks are not being able to be treated as like we're equal, right? Like, it's like some people are sleeping outside. I think, the community engagement we should really be talking about are the people that are outside, are the folks that don't have somewhere to go. It's like, you can give us a 293-page document, but they're not going to be the ones reading that. You see what I'm saying? So if we can make it so that instead of having a conversation where people are in suits and ties and they're talking about like what needs to happen, go to the folks who are proximate to those issues and to those power positions. On my campus at Fisk University, I know a student who commutes all the way from Clarksville. Like, that's the most affordable housing we can get. That's the most proximate we can get to those things because you can't stay on campus for so long. So I think that if we're talking about being proximate, we're talking about community engagement. I think that one of my biggest concerns, I think we should make it to where we're actually proximate to community and not proximate to what we think is community. So I think that's like one of my biggest two mix-up, like the 4,500 to the people who go to everything, right? Like, what are those mix-ups, and can we be more proximate to the people who are in the need of those resources?
I want to jump in because I think, first of all, I appreciate the information because like many of the people in here, I didn't know all this. I mean, I know there are homeless people on the street. I know there are people we don't in this county give a shit about. I've known about that for a long time and see it. I also have a question about the use of the word incentivize in this whole room, not just you. It seems to me that a key issue is that companies and businesses can come into Nashville with impunity and get all these perks, and we don't ask anything of them. There are cities and places where you cannot build in their city without agreeing to a certain percentage of affordable housing, a certain percentage of building city parks, a certain percentage of that. And I don't think we're asking, I agree with my sister here about private and a public partnership. I don't think partnership in Kumbaya is going to do it. I personally think that the incentive needs to be the carrot and the stick, that we can no longer allow builders to come in and build multi-million-dollar houses without having some accountability to the rest of the community. And I don't know how that happens, but a lot of people are getting rich off Nashville, inside and beyond the city, and we are not asking them anything. We are building this huge stadium, and you just don't know how much I hate football to just feel about it personally, because I live with a bunch of leatherheads who, but it just gets on my nerves. But we have the money to do that. But did we ask, or did we require anybody to say, we're going to come in, we're going to give you a $29 million stadium, but you have to provide $5 million in affordable housing, in public housing, in rebuilding a public house, Casey Homes. You got to give $5 million to Casey Homes. We didn't do that. We don't do that. And so my concern is we're talking about the people we're partnering with, and we're talking about incentivizing. But I think we as a city and a state have to get to the point where we're asking for something, not asking, demanding something from the people who are making big money in Nashville.
Just procedure wise, yeah. What do you mean?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think this presentation has generated all these comments and questions
Been helpful to me.
that we haven't even gotten all of it,
Mm-hmm.
which I think that.
I didn't read
again,
it, I'm good at it. Before you go there.
What I'm saying is, I think there is an opportunity here that for me, I think that this administration has a very ambitious plan
Yes.
that doesn't go all the way to the end. It's clear who we are concerned about here. And I think we have an opportunity to further educate ourselves, but to also offer some concrete solutions on that end, because it is wide open. This is the 10 years and all of that. And to your point, yes, it's needed right now.
The emergency.
But this plan is wide open. And I think what we can bring to it is that voice for those on the margins who are the first ones displaced, many of them already gone. Even in Envision Casey, it's not a one-for-one replacement.
No.
I mean, all of that. I live on Fowlerman, right across from Casey. It is a short distance, but a long way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I think this is a great opportunity, and I'm glad to hear everybody angry, and except for Whitney, she's always angry. But no, and again, I think it's the work, and again, the initial report, we were asked to set in on a presentation of the recommendations from the, I hate acronyms, and that's all Metro uses, the Housing Infrastructure Report. The first thing that got me in the report was they told the truth. The government document that historically told the truth about how we got here.
Mm-hmm.
About how over the years we orchestrated the zoning where we are now, which was exclusionary in nature.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's a great start for me, is to tell the truth, which rarely happens in government documents. So Daniel and I have been going through these documents. We're also wanting to engage us to be able to assist from where MHRC has an obvious care and concern with some concrete finishing out those strategies. That is going to take us some time, because I also think what we need to do, just listening, is we need to get you the state laws that impact this, that tell you what you can and you can't do, which are intentional. Many of them were done in conjunction with this jacked up zoning over the years. So if we get you those things, sometimes we can see, yeah, this sounds good, but maybe there should be some lobbying because these problems are spilling over into these other counties. I'm interested in the next census of what did it do with Clarksville? You know, because I think there's been a great movement away. And so what are those numbers? Again, I'm excited about all this. We're about 5 to 6. We're a little bit over our time. I appreciate.
Thank you, Travis.
Yeah, thank you.
Travis,
Travis,
and
thank you
Katie.
so much. We weren't yelling at you, Travis.
No, it's not you.
Never.
Don't take it personally.
It's life.
You were fabulous.
You
Thank
were great.
So
Thank
what's
you.
our what would be our next steps with this?
I would love Greg to come when he's available, if I may ask for that. No offense to you two charmers.
He's already committed to coming.
Great.
He was planning on coming today. His child got sick.
Yeah, and that's, I get it.
Nashville Next Is that a thing? Cause I'm looking on their website. Is it old, outdated? Is
The
it
last
2015,
community plan,
2015.
2015, 2016.
what?
It's the last big massive community plan.
But Katie said, we
Envision.
wanna be
Supposed to be the
aligned with
policy.
Nashville Next. I heard you say that,
Uh-huh.
Katie.
That's right.
So,
So now,
There's the list of people here, housing, they're connected to Vanderbilt, they're connected to hospitals, they're connected to banks, and they're on the Nashville Next Human or Housing Resource Team. Are these old names?
Those are-
Okay.
Well,
so
Yeah,
that study was done in
10 years old.
2015, and it's our general plan that includes that kind of provides like a 25-year vision for Nashville. And it was updated in 2017, that was the last time it was updated. And the planning department is preparing to update it again. Now that we Choose How You Move has been approved and has really kind of validated that approach to managing growth within Metro Nashville or within Nashville and given us a kind of a major step in implementation of Nashville Next. And so the next step is now to kind of update the plan, and I think that's scheduled to happen next year.
Sarah, I didn't mean to make you sad.
Oh, no.
But there's people here that are like partners, they're like Vanderbilt people, so like, wouldn't that be good to have like an updated list of people?
Is it enough that I'm a Vanderbilt person?
I mean, it is, it
Are you though?
It includes, Nashville Next includes the community plans, and so like, whenever anyone goes and requests a zoning change or something, they're looking at that and they're going, okay, this is consistent with the community plan, so we, the planning department, recommend that the planning commission approve
Amy, I
it.
read their website, that's one thing I read.
Well, we can send you that, it's still an active plan.
It still is active,
It
but you know,
is.
it sets like,
It's a
this
reference
neighborhood's
It's
evolving,
not colorful.
so you get to
Amy.
put more houses in there.
Yeah. It's basically how, it guides the recommendations that go to the planning commission on zoning and matters like
I mean,
that.
they're-
Metro even prepares its annual budget with considerations
Yes.
from Nashville Next.
I just wondered what the.
Yes.
So commissioners, thank you for
Yeah.
your time. Please email us more with any questions that we have about this further, and I think we will
Can I-
consider putting people together, inviting committees or whoever wants to come to talk about this and work on this further. It's always open to this.
Yeah.
I appreciate planning very much for coming here, Travis. I'm sorry if we were
You did good.
angry.
We got rowdy on it.
Like,
Do I need to
Crank
move to
kids.
adjourn?
please.
I'd like to move to adjourn with great
Let me
love
say
and
one more
respect.
comment, please.
Davey?
Yeah, just one more.
Sir.
No, because again, I'm excited about this and I'm glad that you are also. But I also want to say that planning reached out to us.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, planning.
They reached out to us on the front end.
We're not mad at
Out
planning.
to
We're
us.
not mad at planning.
We don't
want them to be mad.
We're mad at the
Can we
system.
get like as we move forward, can we get from maybe you guys, like what is since planning reached out to us, what do they need from us? What is our end goal? Are we going to create a report? Are we going to create a strategic plan?
I don't think we know.
I just am wondering because we can meet to meet, but Lord knows I don't got time for that. So, but I would like to meet to do.
Well,
And so what are we supposed to be doing?
well, yes, what we're trying to do is to come up exactly what that is, but I can tell you the big picture of it is we want to help fill out some of these strategies, particularly on the bottom end with actual plans, with actual suggestions,
Recommendations.
toward the idea of equity. We're gonna have to be pushing because you always have the money that's pushing. You always have the paid representation that's pushing. Here's an opportunity for us as a commission to push for equity all the way through whatever this thing turns into. And so what I've heard today tells me that we need to get a bit more information so that when we speak as a group, we provide each other with as much information to answer many of the questions that came up today. I even heard a couple of you say that some of what you heard was the first time you've heard that or seen that. So that's what we need to do because this train is still moving. And you are right. Years ago, when the attack started at the margins, gentrification happened at the margins. People were screaming then. No one paid attention. nobody paid attention, and when the poor communities were decimated of their properties and people moved and didn't have nowhere else to go, they came for the middle. Now everybody's all concerned. No one was concerned when they were ravaging North Nashville.
Right.
Nobody. But people were talking. MHRC was talking then. They published 3 different reports at that time. And so here we are. And you're right, Sarah. This is nothing new. People were screaming. Now, the working class. Now the middle. But I've always believed that the middle is only contingent and quantifiable in relationship to the bottom. And when the bottom moves, your middle moves down with the bottom.
Yeah.
And so I think here's a way. Yeah, the horses left the barn years ago. But what do we do and what can we contribute to this process now?
The barns.
Motion again.
I really love, thank you so much, Director Tucker. I really appreciate you and all you do, and I appreciate everyone here and everyone's thoughts and words and loves. And in Jesus' name, I'd really like to move to adjourn.
Second.
Only because you said in Jesus' name.
All those in favor of adjourning the meeting for today? Thank you, planning. Metro planning.
Like, I didn't know you were gonna make me burst into flame here.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.